Okay, so today we're going to do a tutorial on winding yarn with a Nostepinne. So we've talked about the Nostepinne before on our on this podcast. So it's actually quite an old tool that you use to make a center pole ball. And as you know, if you've been watching us, we're just a big fan of the Nostepinne ball, the coconut or the avocado as we call it. But I'm going to show you there's different ways to wind. So the first thing you do is I'm just going to put this down. You just make a slip knot in your yarn. And the Nostepinne has a couple little notches on it. There's one at the top and there's also some at the bottom. I use the bottom one, but I think it's more or less personal preference. And you just tighten up your yarn in one of the notches in the bottom. And I'm right-handed, so I wind with my right hand. So I'm holding the Nostepinne in my left hand. I take the tail that's there and I put that under my hand on the handle. And then to get this started on the Nostepinne to start the winding, I'm just going to put it to the front so you can see. I actually hold in the middle with my thumb, and this is where I'm going to start winding. So I'm winding a few strands on just to make a base. Okay, so now you've got a little coil there, and now I'm going to create a next. I'm going to wind around the bottom, touching the wood, and then go all the way up to the top and touch the wood. So I have a little diagonal line. I'm going to turn the Nostepinne slightly, and I'm going to do the same wind again. Another diagonal. Some people do an X, that's okay too, but I just start right away with my little ridge, and when we come around here you're going to catch that bottom loop. So I'm always touching the wood at the bottom and touching the wood at the top, touching the wood at the bottom, touching the wood at that was the bottom, touching the wood at the top, touching the wood at the bottom. And I'm a little bit slow when I first started out just because I just want to keep it kind of neat. Once you've got everything that's tightened up in here, this is not going to move now, so you can kind of relax a little bit, and you just keep going around. You're turning the Nostepinne in the opposite direction that you're twisting the yarn on. If you can see, I'm going this way with the yarn, and I'm turning the Nostepinne like this. Okay, so I'm just going to speed it up a little bit, and you don't need to be too worried if you've got gaps in your winds. You don't need to be too fussy about it. It'll all come out perfect. So you can see how this is working. It's looking like a regular wound ball of yarn. I'm going to wind up a little bit, and you'll start to see the coconut shape or the avocado, and then I'll change the way that I'm winding it to make it look more like a cake, so you'll see both, whatever you prefer. Okay, so now that I've got a few yards on there, you can start to see how it looks. And I'm just, my yarn got a little bit. So I just keep going like that. I'm just trying to avoid creating a lump in the middle of it. You can still get rid of it, but it's just easier to keep it neat. I'm just gonna go full speed in case people are worried that it's gonna take them 3 days to wind a ball of yarn. So when I'm doing it full speed, I'm going like this. And the trick to this is just to make sure that you're just winding to the bottom and then up to the top, and you're touching the wood with every, you can see how that's really starting to thing. So I'm going to wind a bit more, and then I'll show you how you change it into a cake. Okay, so you can really see how it's going to have that slightly oblong shape if I kept balling this way. So now I'm going to show you how you get more of a cake-like shape if you don't like the coconut. So to start the cake, I always start the ball the same way, and then I get a little bit of a few yards on here before I start winding it to make the cake shape, and you'll see why in a second. So what you do just to change the shape of it is you, instead of touching the wood on the top and the bottom, so you're not going all the way to the wood, you're just going somewhere into the edge of the ball. So when you're making the coconut, you're making sure you're touching the wood every turn. When you're doing a cake, you wind on the ball itself. So I'll show you what that looks like. So you see, I'm not touching the wood, Just gonna do a couple lines. Then I'm turning, still making sure I'm not touching the wood. Takes a few minutes for it to start to change its shape, but you can already start to see it's starting to flatten out. Okay, so I'm just gonna wind for a few minutes and then we'll come back. So I've got quite a bit wound on here, and I just, when I'm doing a cake shape, I do squeeze it down a little bit just to keep that, flatten it out a bit more, but you can see right away that it has a completely different shape than the other ball. The good news is that it's just as firm, and it's nice and solid no matter which way that you do it. And you're still going to end up obviously with a center pull or an outside pull, whatever you want. So I'm just going to finish winding this, and then I'll show you how we take it off and start using it. So we're coming to the end, so I'm just going to Okay, so I just have the last few yards. I'm just going to wind it in the center, like this, in the center of the ball, just to finish it off. Now I just have to take the slip knot off. Okay, take the slip knot off, slide this right off the Nostepinne. And then it's completely smooth inside. It's magnificent. You just tuck the end in here, and you can use it from the outside, or you can pull from the center, and there you have it.